Now let's get into the meat of this part of the reading, which is, of course, the Black-Scholes-Merton option pricing model, which, of course, needs no presentation. People won Nobel Prizes for it. But on this slide, we just need to understand the assumptions. So firstly, we're talking about an underlying asset that follows a geometric Brownian motion. Now, this is going to sound a lot like physics. It's not that difficult. Yes, of course, if you dig under the hood, you're going to be talking about stochastic calculus. We're going to talk about deterministic drifts and stochastic elements. But essentially, in a nutshell, what we are saying is we're going to have this process. We're going to determine what the drift is, the mean return of the asset is, and then we're going to introduce some randomness based on the normal distribution. So we need to understand, however, this fact that the returns, which by the way are continuously compounded, all rates in this model are continuously compounded, and these returns are normally distributed. The easiest way to remember that they have to be normally distributed is because they can be negative, and the normal distribution allows you positive and negative returns. If they ever talk about the actual asset price, that's log normally distributed because, of course, the asset price cannot go below zero. There are no market frictions. That simply means we assume that we're not paying taxes or commissions, and also there are no arbitrage opportunities. Couple of very important inputs to the model, the risk-free rate, of course, and volatility. We are going to assume that we know what they are. Well, they are inputs, so we have to know them. And we're going to assume that they're going to remain constant over the life of the option. We're allowing borrowing and lending at the risk-free rate. And also, this is a very important one, the type of option that we're valuing here is of the European style. So if you want to value an American option, you gotta go back to the good old binomial tree that I showed you in part 1. So Black-Scholes-Merton only deals with European style options. You can accommodate a dividend yield if you wish to. That's going to be a continuously compounded dividend yield. And just think intuitively what happens when the stock pays a dividend. The stock price has to decline on the ex-dividend date. So that dividend yield acts as a drag on the stock price. But of course, because it's continuously compounded, the way we accommodate it is instead of just using S within the model, we're going to use S times E to the power of delta T, where delta is the continuously compounded dividend yield. So that effectively haircuts the spot price and removes the dividend from it. Now, let's get to what I consider to be probably the most important slide here, and that's to actually know how the equation works for the call and the put option. And these equations might look really scary at first. So the way I'm going to show it to you is by building it step by step. So for the call, I'm simply going to take S and I'm going to subtract X, because S minus X is nothing but the intrinsic value of the option. So you can't go wrong with that. Now, it's a European option. You will have to pay the strike at expiry. So in theory, you could stash away some money today in a savings account at the risk-free rate, and that's going to grow to the future value of X. So today, you only need the present value of X, but of course, we're going to use continuous compounding here. So E to the power of minus RT. So that element there is nothing but PVX, okay, the present value of the strike. Remember, I only have to pay the strike in the future. So today I need less money saved away. And now the next thing I'm going to say is come down here and understand what ND2 means. So ND2, of course, is a probability from the cumulative normal distribution. And in particular, what it means is the probability of actually exercising the call option. So the way you want to think here is that, yes, you have to stash away PVX, but you only have to pay that money in the future if the call option actually gets exercised. So you're taking that pot of money and you're weighting it by the probability of exercising the option. You don't have to pay unless you exercise the option. And now that leaves us with one more element, and that's ND1, which is the call delta. Now, in part 1 of the video, we spent time talking about the hedge ratio. Well, hedge ratio was computed discretely from the binomial tree. The continuous version of the hedge ratio is known as ND1, or the call delta. Just to remind you what that is the fraction of shares that you need in order to hedge one short call. So in this case here, I'm just going to be multiplying by ND1, and I've got my value of the call. So let's pause and let's think about what this is telling me, because really here, it's not about a computation, it's about understanding what the equation is telling you. So to create a synthetic call option, I'm going to say it slowly here because this is really important. To create a synthetic call option, you need ND1 units of long stock. Yeah, so you imagine here there's a plus, so that's telling you need to go long. You need to go ND1 units of stock. And then this minus is telling you need to short. Well, what do you need to short? You need to short ND2 units of, what is this? This is a 0 coupon bond with a face value of strike and a price today of PVX. Okay, let me say one more time. To create a synthetic call option, you need to long ND1 units of stock and you need to short ND2 units of 0 coupon debt. Now just abstract this a little bit. Take a step back and just think the big picture. What is a call option? The call option gives me levered exposure on the underlying. And what am I doing here? I am borrowing, I'm shorting a 0 coupon bond, so therefore I am borrowing and then I'm putting that money into the stock. So I'm creating a levered exposure on the stock. And if I do it in these exact ratios dictated by ND1 and ND2, I'm going to be replicating the behavior of the actual true exchange traded call option. All right, let's look at the put option now. So for the put, we're going to take exactly the same approach. Think about intrinsic value. X minus S is intrinsic value. Again, we have to receive that X in the future. So we are going to take PVX today. And again, we need to only account for the probability of exercising the put. But the probability of exercising the put is actually 1 minus ND2. So if the probability of exercising a call with the same strike was ND2, then the probability of exercising a put would be 1 minus ND2. Mathematically, that's equivalent to N of minus D2. N of minus D2. So that's something that I would have taught you at level 1 quants. Believe me, that is the case. So I will be receiving the strike, but only if the put gets exercised. So I'm going to be multiplying here by N minus D2. And then again, I need to take the delta and apply it to the stock. Here I'm going to be applying N minus D1. And as you can imagine, 1 minus ND1 is N of minus D1. Okay, so now I've got both the call and the put written for you. Again, the focus shouldn't be on dry memorization of the formula. It should be on understanding what the formula is telling me. So here, to create a synthetic put, I need to purchase N minus D2 units of zero coupon debt having a face value of X. And then I need to short N minus D1 units of stock. Again, take a step back and think about what a put is doing. Put is betting on the decline in the stock. And what are you doing synthetically here? You are shorting the stock, therefore betting on the decline in the stock. And then you're obviously using the proceeds from the short sale to invest at the risk-free rate. So if you're doing this in the correct ratios dictated by N minus D1 and N minus D2, you are replicating the behavior of the regular exchange traded put.